Hello, this is Dr. Scott Hoye. Welcome to Psychology Talk. Today's guest is creativity expert Michael J. Gelb on mastering the art of public speaking. Hello, everyone. Today my guest is Michael Gelb. He's an authority on the application of genius thinking to personal and organizational development. He's also a pioneer in the fields of creative thinking, innovative leadership, and executive coaching. Michael is the author of 17 books, including How to Think Like Leonardo da Vinci, Discover Your Genius, Innovate Like Edison, and The Art of Connection, 7 relationship-building skills every leader needs now. Today he joins me to discuss his new book, Mastering the Art of Public Speaking, 8 Secrets to Overcoming Fear and Supercharge Your Career. Michael, my pleasure. Welcome to the show.
Thank you so much. Great to be with you.
Okay. Well, maybe you can kind of start out by talking a little bit about the book, who it's for, and what the concepts are in it.
Sure. Mastering the Art of Public Speaking is for anybody who ever wants to speak in public.
Okay. All right.
That's pretty much everybody.
Okay. So it's not just for corporate go-getters. It's not just for people who would be more akin to that. They could be Toastmasters or other people, just the general public could be into that. Okay.
General public,
okay.
You speak, best man speech at a wedding, bridesmaid speech, eulogy.
Okay. Wow. Yeah.
Yes.
Okay. Yeah. So
the whole range to professional. I work with professional public speakers. Mm-hmm. And what I did in this book is I've been a professional public speaker myself for 45 years. I'm just warming up.
Okay.
So, but what that means is I actually get paid to give presentations,
which is kind of cool. Yeah.
It's super cool. I still can't get over how blessed I am to get paid for doing what I love to do the most. I'm most comfortable, most happy in front of an audience. The bigger, the better. Mm-hmm. Love being on stage.
Okay.
Love seeing the light go on in people's eyes when they get an aha about Leonardo da Vinci or creativity or any of the topics you mentioned in my various books. All those books are presentations. They're all keynote speeches, and I've done them all over the world. But in the while doing all that, I paid attention to what does it take to do this, and how can I relate what I do as a professional to what a person who just wants to be able to overcome their butterflies when they're getting ready to speak to the senior managers in their company.
Okay. Or
asked to give a talk at the PTA or the Boy Scouts or the Girl Scouts or whatever it happens to be. What's the wisdom from professionals that you can apply to being more comfortable in any kind of speaking situation? So the way I say it is, how do you get the butterflies to fly in formation?
Yeah, okay. Yeah. I think that makes a lot of sense. In a former life, I was an actor, so I did notice that the stage fright they kind of diminished into butterflies. Yes, and the butterflies were a lot more controllable. So that's a nice metaphor.
Thank you. Well, what's fascinating is so many famous actors have stage fright.
Oh yeah,
they do major butterflies, and I originally began professionally training as a teacher of the Alexander technique, which is the method for developing stage presence. They teach it at the Juilliard School in New York, at the Manhattan School of Music, at the Royal Academy of Drama, the Royal Academy of Music. It's one of the trade secrets of professional performers for developing stage presence and poise and dealing with stage fright. So I studied it not because I had stage fright or because I was an actor or performer, but just because I found it fascinating. I was fascinated by the metaphor that stage fright was like life fright. How do you overcome fears and show up in life. And it seemed to me that the Alexander work was a very practical methodology for helping people do that. Mm-hmm. And then, much to my surprise, I started getting engaged by various corporations around the world to teach them about a range of skills from creative thinking to innovative leadership to teamwork and so on. And it turned out this was a very relevant skill for those people. So I started coaching them in how to apply it to be better at presenting. And that's part of what led to Mastering the Art of Public Speaking.
Okay, so, and this is not an A to Z kind of journey. It's kind of circuitous. I know that there was a prior book, having read the book, there was a prior book that some of the concepts in this book are based upon. Could you say what that is and what?
Sure.
Yeah, like it doesn't seem like you need to actually read that book to get the gist of this book.
Well, that's the good news. Yes. So there's actually two books that, I mean, all the books actually, they create one connects to the other, but specifically related to Mastering the Art of Public Speaking. In 1988, I wrote a book called Present Yourself, Captivate Your Audience with Great Presentation Skills. Mm-hmm. And that book actually stayed in print for 30 years until 2018. But fortunately, it finally did go out of print. And I said to myself, it's time to do an updated version of this with everything I've learned in the last 30 years. Okay. So that was the original thought about writing Mastering the Art of Public Speaking. But the other key element was that, I've always asked, for every book I've written, I've asked the question, what do I know the most about that might be helpful to other people? And in 2017, my answer to that question was relationship building. So with New World Library, my publisher, I put together this book called The Art of Connection, 7 relationship building skills every leader needs now. Because after years of teaching people how to think creatively, how to be more innovative, it was clear that the biggest block to the application of creative ideas and innovative strategies was people's inability to communicate, relationship challenges, conflict. And I thought, I have to express everything I've learned about how you can build better relationships. So that's what's in The Art of Connection. And part of really mastering the art of public speaking is really The Art of Connection, Volume 2. Because the other element of connection is connecting with groups of people by getting your message across in a way that really connects with people, where you're really in rapport. Just like the secret of getting along with individuals and building relationships one-to-one is to have rapport. It's to have a sense of simpatico with people. It's the same thing with 1,000 people. You have a feeling of rapport, simpatico, connection with that whole audience, and then they're really open to being influenced by you. They're open to your message, and they remember it, and you'll have more fun. So that's how it all connects.
So there's a kind of simpatico between them and the audience. So, but, as a psychologist who works with people with anxiety symptoms and stage fright a lot, and where do you overcome, that stage fright for the normal person, or even for the actor, right? Where do you overcome that? Rather than how do you get them to shift focus? And a lot of what I do is to shift focus, is to work on down-regulating the sympathetic nervous system and getting them into their bodies and focusing on the task at hand and wanting to share the ideas. But is there a kind of bridge that you find is helpful?
Well, as all psychologists know, people need all the help they can get.
True that. Yeah.
So I aim to share with my readers everything I've learned, and part of it is what you shared. I mean, it really helps, first of all, to be prepared. If you know what you're talking about, if you have a story that you enjoy telling that gets your point across, it's amazing how much easier it is to speak to people. If you think, I have to give a presentation and it's got to be formal, you probably will be nervous because that's a nerve-wracking situation. But if you just start telling people a story about something that you care about, that you think might help them, it's amazing how that by itself transforms the situation.
Yeah.
Then the things I actually practice myself, especially before a really big, challenging presentation. And, there's this thing about being a professional speaker. I mean, I take it quite seriously. They're paying me a lot of money to speak sometimes for not very long time. And I really want it to be great every time. And I prepare, not just by getting ready to tell a story about something that I'm passionate about, that I really think will help them. So I definitely do that. But I also get ready beforehand in all the ways that I take people through in the book. And one of my favorites is just the simplest thing in the world to shift your whole physiology is do a really intense workout before you speak. I mean, obviously, you have to leave yourself time to take a shower and comb your hair and put on proper clothing and so on. But even if you're going to give a presentation in the evening and you did an intense workout that morning, you are physiologically so much better oriented when you take that stage. You're more at ease. You're more poised. You're more relaxed. You've changed your biochemistry. And then, there's all sorts of wonderful things you can do in your hotel room or backstage just before you go on to help shift out of the fight, flight, stress modality and into being present and resourceful and happy to be there. It's not really that complicated, and the methodologies I teach, they're so simple. They're drawing a lot of from the martial arts. I'm a 5th degree black belt in Aikido. I teach Tai Chi and Qigong, and I love martial arts because if you're getting ready to actually fight somebody, that sets off. That is the fight flight response.
Oh yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
Right, you got to fight. So how do you stay relaxed? How do you stay present? How do you stay poised in that kind of situation? Well, I teach people those methodologies for getting ready to go give a speech, and which is a lot easier than facing a opponent in a boxing match or a kung fu tournament.
Yeah, I think there's a lot of overlap between what people do to prepare for a stage presentation and martial arts or sports. It seems counterintuitive to a lot of people, but it is very similar. You're right. It's kind of, as they say in neuro-linguistic programming circles, it's that shift state or control of the state, right?
Yes, and this is the thing is, learning to shift your state is pretty simple. Most people just, they're not aware of the state that they're in. So they just know they feel miserable. Instead of saying, this is, instead of recognizing the mindfully attending to what is actually happening in a given moment, being present with it, you don't have to immediately try to fix it. I'm sure you do this with your clients. It's just have them be present and notice what's actually happening. Because if we can be present with butterflies, with a feeling of emptiness, with a feeling of deflation in the lungs, with a feeling of tension in the jaw, with a feeling of rising the shoulders, holding on to the lower belly, squeezing the hips and the knees, even the toes. Just being present with it, just noticing it, actually begins to shift it a little bit.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so it's really simple things, just more awareness.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, yeah.
And then also recognizing that energy that you're feeling, that we can call anxiety, we can reframe it as excitement.
There you go. Yes, absolutely.
Right?
Yeah, absolutely.
And, wow, there's so much energy. And the thing is, anxiety is when that energy is blocked, it's held, it's not flowing. But if we focus on the audience and our objectives for the audience, and in the book I take people through a simple practice to do before every presentation of writing down, what do you want the audience to know specifically as a result of this interaction? How do you want them to feel? And what do you want them to do? And when you know why you're talking to people, what's the purpose of this? What exactly do I want to communicate? How do I want them to feel? And what do I want them to do? Then you have a clear purpose for what you're doing. And that it's amazing how that tends to organize your whole system so that you're focused on achieving those purposes, not worried about how, what you used to call anxiety, which is now you realize is enthusiasm and excitement. Now we have a direction to send it, which is towards the objective we have for this particular audience.
Right, correct. Well, I know that you mentioned in the book some of Amy Cuddy's research, and some people might be very aware of her very million times plus downloaded TED Talk. Can you go over how that's applied, or how you kind of reference that? Yeah.
Well, it's great drama, actually, because Amy Cuddy gave a brilliant TED Talk. She's an excellent presenter.
Absolutely.
She was quite authentic and open. The audience connected with her. She presented her research. And the simple idea was that you can change your state by power posing. In other words, do a sort of jaunty, hands-on-hip Wonder Woman pose, or raise your arms in a Charles Atlas muscle man, muscle woman, super person pose. And that when you make these kinds of poses, you not only change your own physiology so that you feel more empowered, but that people perceive you as more authoritative.
Now, you laugh as you say that, but obviously you're somebody who is authoritative, but you don't take it too seriously, obviously.
No, well, just like it sort of seems a little bit absurd that, you're going to go in front of your boardroom and put your hands on your hip and say, do the Wonder Woman thing. But I think, what Cuddy was saying, you could even do that for a minute or two before you go into the boardroom. I don't think she necessarily meant that you.
Yeah. I think the interesting thing about it was that she says that testosterone levels are raised just for 2 minutes of doing that, and cortisol levels go down. So the feel good, the euphoric hormone goes up, the stress hormone goes down.
Yep. And so anyway, she published this research. She gave this famous TED Talk. And then I think a lot of people were hugely jealous of her because she was suddenly so popular. And this idea did seem maybe a little bit simplistic or too good to be true. So there was all sorts of doubt cast upon it. But in the end, she wasn't really saying anything that isn't familiar to a professional actor or martial artist who known for generations that the way you comport yourself profoundly affects how you feel and how an audience perceives you.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
The point. Go ahead.
No. I think. Yeah. I'm just in agreement with that. Correct.
Right. So then, what if, however, we then took the remarkably sophisticated best of what actors have learned, of what martial artists have learned, and translated that into simple things that any of us can do before we give whatever the presentation is. And I try to give people a whole menu of things because not everybody wants to do everything. So find the one that works best for you. But the simplest thing is actually learning to be comfortable in an upright poise. It changes the way people perceive you, and the best part is it also changes how you feel. So, the simplest way to put it is imagine that you are sitting in a room, and whatever the room happens to be, it doesn't matter, but into that room walks the person that you admire most in the world. What happens to your posture when that person walks in the room? Most people, if you ask people to imitate it, they become upright and poised and focused, and they have a smile of anticipation because there's their favorite, most admired person. And we want to be at our best and at our most open and contactful to connect with that wonderful person. Mm-hmm. So just do that before you speak. But you're laughing again. You're laughing, Michael.
Right.
Why are you? You're saying just do that.
Simple.
Yeah, it is simple. It is. Yeah, and I think that it's very complex at the same time because. Well, that's the thing is it's very sophisticated, but it's very simple to do. And by the way, you notice that I laugh a lot because that's another one of the things that I teach people is don't take yourself so seriously. I mean, come on. Yeah. If you and by the way, it's not just before the presentation, but if you can get your audience to laugh, sorry, you're going to be fine. I mean, and as a professional public speaker, let me explain something too. Part of why I get paid is I go into audiences who don't want to be there. Their boss told them they had to be at this. The last thing they want to hear about is creativity or relationships. They just want to get back to churning out whatever they have to churn out that day. They have a sense of urgency, and they're not necessarily interested in what I have to say at all. And I, only for the last 45 years, have walked into roomful people like that, sitting there with body language that you don't have to be an NLP person to read and know that they're saying, we're not interested in you, this is rubbish, don't waste our time. Okay. So it's a classic. And so it's like you're if you were a comedian, you'd be walking into a room full of hecklers. Well, that's what I say. I actually have a Jerry Seinfeld quote in the book about how he deals with hecklers, because I think stand-up comedy is the most challenging form of public speaking. Oh yeah, yeah. It's the hardest thing to do. So I study Seinfeld. I study the great comics, because they always disarm the audience, and they know that a heckle is a gift. They know that this is what we know in Aikido too. Resistance is a gift. Somebody comes at me, charges at me, it's a gift of energy. How will I receive it? So we don't get defensive and we don't react. We are playful. We respond, we empathize in the moment. Because guess what? I empathize with those people who are sitting there. They have a sense of urgency. They don't know yet that what I'm going to tell them is going to change their life and help them be not just more fulfilled and more productive and more creative, but might even enrich their personal lives and help them be better parents. There's no way they can know that yet. And they're busy, so I get it. I empathize with how they feel. And then I'm focused on, what do I want them to know? How do I want them to feel? What do I want them to do as a result of my presentation? And I tell them stories. But the key moment is always as soon as I get them to laugh. And then all of a sudden, the body language changes. The arms uncross. They shift in their chair a little bit. I start to get smiles. They start to be willing to make eye contact. And, I have to say, my favorite thing is when I get them really laughing. And I once got a few people to fall out of their chairs. That's my ultimate. If I can get you to actually fall out of your chair. But the thing is, I'm having so much fun while I'm doing this. And we know, right, our psychological background, we know that emotions are contagious for better or for worse. Mm-hmm. So what do you want to spread? What do you want to catch? What do you want to spread? And in the book, I mentioned this very important point that the most organized nervous system tends to lead the proceedings. So,
okay, yeah.
My nervous system is way more organized, way more focused than anybody else in the room. Mm. I know where we're going. I know how we're going to get there. I know why it's important. I'm totally passionately committed to helping these people, inspiring them, getting as much across as I can. And that works pretty much every time.
Yeah. You're there to help them understand.
My higher, yes, I like doing what I do. I like earning a living this way. I'm there partly. I want to get paid, and it's what I do for a living. But that is secondary. The main thing is I want to inspire them. I want to give them tools that will help them be more creative, have better relationships, be more innovative, learn faster. So I've been teaching this for many. I'm more excited about it now than I ever have been. I love what I do more than ever. I love the chance to share this with different audiences. And I'm super excited about helping other people develop their ability to be really comfortable speaking, to get really good at it. That's why the book is called Mastering the Art of Public Speaking. Mm-hmm. And mastery is a continuous journey that I'm still on. I'm still learning. I'm still improving as a speaker. But I want to invite people on that journey and hope that they have as much fun with it as I'm still having.
Well, we talked about like preparing yourself or engaging the audience for the person who wants to dive into these ideas. There's also some mnemonic devices that are really cool in the book. Can you explain some of those?
Sure. Well, the main thing is a successful presentation. Not only will the audience understand what you have shared with them, but they'll actually remember it. Because if they understand it, but then go away and forget it, what was the point of your presentation?
Correct, right.
So, and understanding is not the same thing as remembering. And remembering is also not the same thing as understanding. So some people mindlessly parrot something back, but they don't understand what it is that they're parroting back. And other people might understand very profound, complex points that a speaker makes, but you run into them next week and say, what do you remember from that talk? And they say, what talk? So those are two ways to have very little impact.
Yeah.
So a great presentation, people understand it and they remember it. But in order for that to happen, what has to happen first is you, the presenter, have to remember what the heck you're talking about.
So what do you offer for that in the book?
Yeah. Well, so here's the thing is, part of why people have stage fright is because they aren't confident that they'll remember what they wanted to say, and they don't want to be standing there in front of a room full of people drawing a blank. It's one of the biggest fears people have, is that they'll just go blank and they'll be humiliated and everyone will laugh at them. And if you prepare, that's highly unlikely. You might have a temporary glitch, and what you do if you let's say you're on stage and you just forget what you're talking about. You get distracted or somebody asks a question and you don't remember where you were. Here's a wild technique. Ask the audience, where was I? People say, oh, you were just talking about it. You say, oh, yeah, thanks. Just like you would do if you were with a friend and you were telling a story. And what's so great is you do that and it's actually endearing because the audience, everybody will forget where they are from time to time. If you just act like a normal human being and ask the audience, they'll tell you and you'll actually bond with them more. So even if you happen to forget, you'll be fine if you remember to ask, where was I?
That's pretty good.
Right? But you're less likely to forget if you do a couple of things. And one is to make a mind map of your presentation.
Okay. Tell us about that.
So mind mapping is a methodology for generating and organizing and remembering your ideas. It was originated by my old friend Tony Buzan. And actually, one of the coolest things about mastering the art of public speaking, my friend Brian Weller is a genius mind mapper, and he has crafted mind maps of each of the chapters of the book.
I noticed that.
Yeah, and they are amazing because you can read any one of his mind maps, and it gives you a memory device for the whole chapter. And then he did a mind map of the whole book. And so and when you look at these mind maps, if you'll read the book and then you look at the mind map, you say, wow, here's all the information from this chapter on one page. That's so cool.
And it's exemplary, but it also reinforces the process and the ideas you've learned.
Exactly. Now, let's say you wanted to give a presentation. And this is one of the things I invite people to do in the book. I say, choose one of the chapters of this book and give a presentation to some of your friends or colleagues at work so that you can practice presenting what you've learned. Because that's one of the best ways to remember something that you've learned is to practice it. It's also called rehearsal. But here's the cool thing. You could take any one of the mind maps in the book and use that as your notes for the presentation that you will give on that chapter. Now, the only thing better than using Brian's mind map would be to make your own.
Correct. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
So, I worked, I know Brian, so Brian's a friend of mine. He was in our original group in the mid-1970s. It was called the Learning Methods Group in London with Tony Buzan, Brian, Peter Russell, who's written many superb books, including The Brain Book. A gentleman named Mark Brown who's written a number of books. All of us became authors. We all wrote our books using mind mapping. We're all professional speakers. We all use mind mapping to prepare our speeches. When I give my most popular keynote speech around the world remains How to Think Like Leonardo da Vinci, the title of the book I wrote that came out in 1998. And as part of that keynote presentation, I teach people mind mapping because it is the thinking tool to really think like Leonardo da Vinci. And at the end of the presentation, I show them my mind map of the keynote presentation that I just gave them. Hand-drawn. I project it up on the PowerPoint screen, and I invite them to copy it or make a photo of it. And then I say, could this have been my notes for this presentation? And they nod. And I say, yes, they were. I say, could this have been the notes from which I wrote the book? And they nod. And I say, yes, they were. I say, if you have now copied this or photographed it, could you use this as your notes to give a presentation about what you just learned from me? And they're all nodding, going, yes, we could. So that's the power of mind mapping. It's a mnemonic device, so you'll remember your own message and then be way more confident when you present it to other people.
It's also a nice way to set up a yes set for the audience. So they agree with you. Of course, why wouldn't they anyway? It's a great idea. But it's a beautiful, it's very subtle persuasion and helping them to agree to learn something that will help them. And they've seen how it does. Yeah.
It's pretty simple.
Very elegant. Very elegant. Well, the other thing in the other chapter that really piqued my mind was, stood out for me was the one on ProPAR. What is ProPAR? What does that anagram mean?
So this is based on research into the psychology of memory, because we're saying if we want to remember something, if we want other people to remember it, we need to understand what happens to recall during a period of time. Let's say you're invited to give an hour-long presentation. What parts of that presentation are people most likely to remember? Well, the beginning and the end. And sure enough, that is what years and years of psychological research tells us. People remember that which happens first. It's called the primacy effect. Mm-hmm. And they remember that which happens last. That's the recency effect. Now, in between primacy and recency, much is forgotten. There are three key psychological principles that organize recall in the middle of the presentation. One is repetition. If it's repeated, people are more likely to remember it. Another is called the von Restorff effect. If it's unusual or outstanding, people are more likely to remember it. And if it's personally associated or especially meaningful, it's easier to remember. So in the book, I give people a memory quiz. I have them read a list of words and then see how many they remember. And guess what? People remember the first few words on the list and the last few words on the list. They remember all the words that are repeated, the ones that are weird, strange, or different, and the ones that have some kind of special association for them. So these 5 principles, primacy, repetition, outstandingness, personal association, and recency, that's ProPAR. ProPAR is an acronym I created so you can remember the principles of how to remember.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And so I assume that having read the book, I know this, of course, but you kind of you structure your presentations around these principles, correct?
Well, that's a simple thing that everybody can do is say, okay, and you see how this starts to fit together. Okay, now I know what I want them to know. And I know how I want them to feel, and I know what I want them to do. So let me find a way to translate that into a few simple key points. And I will share those key points when? Well, right at the beginning. What am I going to then do with those key points? I'm going to repeat them. I'm going to tell a story or an anecdote or a joke that makes them outstanding and unforgettable. I'm going to try to tell a story that they can relate to so it's personally associated. And I'm going to ask them lots of questions, real and rhetorical, so they feel more personally associated with the message. Nice. And then what am I going to do at the end? That's right. I'm either going to review it, repeat it one more time, or even more elegantly ask the audience to repeat back to me the key points that they got. Voila, ProPAR, we just made our message unforgettable.
Wow. Okay. Wow. And this is just basically, this sounds like a very, very much you're on script with this almost every presentation or every presentation that you do.
Well, once again, it helps you organize your butterflies. You feel way more confident because you have a research validated, evidence-based, this is how memory works. This is how recall works. And this is also how engagement works. Do you know that when you ask an audience a rhetorical question, it raises their recall and attention level by more than 50%.
Well, I might remember that now. Yeah.
Right. So we when you have all this, and how are you supposed to know this unless unless you read a book about it or went on a class about it? I mean, people just say, start speaking, get up there. Some people are good at it, some people aren't. But that's, we need help. We need support. We need research. We need experience. So what I've aimed to do in Mastering the Art of Public Speaking is just consolidate all of these things. As you can tell, I really use so that I can go. The other thing about being a professional speaker is it has to be great every time. Mm-hmm. You have to show up every single time.
Well, if that's your main job in life for solvency, yes, I know you write a lot of books, but obviously you do want it to be the best every time, great every time. Yeah, that makes perfect sense.
Yeah, and the books are just brochures for my speaking business. I'm serious. That's how you make the money. I mean, I have made. Thank God for Leonardo. That's paid for maybe my house.
Well, yeah. Also, like if there's reincarnation and that guy comes back, I think he's going to look for some residuals.
We're on very good terms because he's pleased with my branding and PR work I've done on his behalf. So we're cool.
Good. Okay. All right. Well, but you did say that. About the book, but Michael, I read the book. I'm still going to go back to it. I as I mentioned before we started rolling, I do a lot of this stuff already. Maybe not as succinctly, but when I work with people who have stage fright or they have to put a presentation together for a big consulting firm or something, dealing with the bosses, it really, I'm going to recommend the book. As soon as it hits the presses and as a kind of adjunct and a way to kind of frame sessions with people. I think it's beautifully laid out. I think the mind maps are an excellent way to reinforce it. So don't sell this product short. It's a wonderful book. I'd recommend it to coaches and therapists out there and anybody who wants to learn how to speak better in public.
That's wonderful. Thank you so much, because that would be... If in terms of what I would want people to do with the book, you just expressed it. It's not just that I'm hoping people will read it on their own to improve their presentations, but that people such as yourself who are helping others can use this as a guide to help others in just the way you mentioned. So thank you for articulating that.
Yeah, I think a lot of us are already doing that, but speaking of articulate, the book is a much more articulate and succinct way of handing that. If you can work in person with a coach or a therapist and have the book, I think it's kind of it's synergistic and reinforces that the new behaviors and new learnings from it. So yeah, it's an excellent book. I hats off.
Yay! Thank you.
Yeah. Well, is there anything else you'd like to say before we wrap up here? Is there anything besides your genius that you need to express?
Well, just that this approach to mastering the art of public speaking is more than just a means to the end of giving better speeches or overcoming fear or getting people to remember. I see it as a path of individuation, self-actualization, personal growth, because ultimately the best presentations are genuine, they're real, they're authentic, they're expressions of your true voice. And that presupposes that you know what your true voice is. So many people come to work with a coach or a psychologist or some kind of professional to get help in living a more authentic life that is truer to one's real being and nature. So I offer this book to people as support in that quest. It's more than just about giving a better speech. It's about something that can support the journey that we're all on towards living from our true selves.
Okay, I would recommend. I would definitely concur that. I think that there is that in the book, and just speaking with you, I can sense that as well. That is part of it, and I do think when you improve yourself in one area of life, especially an area where you become more congruent and more yourself and embodied while you use your voice and learn to use it better, it can have an effect on other areas of your life as well in a positive way.
Amen.
Okay. Well, Michael Gelb, thank you so much for coming. If you haven't figured it out by listening to this whole podcast, the book is Master the Art of Public Speaking, 8 Secrets to Overcome Fear and Supercharge Your Career. And I would also add life. Okay. Well, thank you so much.
My pleasure. And if people want to get more information about the book, they can come to my website, michaelgelb.com, GELB. There'll be all sorts of wonderful links, including this podcast.
All right. Okay. In case you forget that elsewhere on the net. Okay. Well, take care. Take care and stay well. Be healthy. Thank you for tuning in. If you like what you heard, do yourself a favor and subscribe to us at iTunes, Spreaker, or your favorite streaming podcast service. And please leave a review. It helps us to know how we're doing. All material copyright, the Psychology Talk podcast. Music is provided by the band Serenade.